Bones. Bones, 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 bones.
Bones? Bones? Bone!
We all love bones. You probably have 206 of them in your body right now. I hope you appreciate them and take good care of them, because otherwise you'd just be on the floor with the consistency of chunky salsa, and that's not fun for anyone. Even Dead by Daylight has bones. It's had them since 2017 when the Of Flesh and Mud chapter came out, and the totem system got introduced alongside 3 hex perks: Third Seal, Devour Hope, and Ruin. These 3 perks, but especially Ruin, were received pretty well. Ruin was a staple of players' builds for years, and when the Shattered Bloodline chapter the following year introduced the idea of a defensive hex, one that punishes you for randomly cleansing any lit hex you find, the potential design space of the hex system skyrocketed, and almost every year of DBD's development saw new hex perks added to the game. To be clear, it's not always been the smoothest of rides. Anyone here geriatric enough to remember Old Undying, where you had to cleanse Ruin 5 times to get rid of it? And similarly, we've had times where hexes have felt completely useless, such as when Circle of Healing was meta, and survivors were even more encouraged to interact with totems and run totem finders like Max or Counterforce than they would be normally. But right now might be the most interesting period we've ever been in for the hex system, because we've never had so many hexes that just aren't worth bringing, while having dedicated hex builds be at the top of the meta. There's a real problem with the hex system that's been slowly growing over the years as the design philosophies behind killer powers and perk designs change and slowly shift what hex perks are worth running and why. With new killers like Jason and the Judgment coming out that synergize well with hex perks, new hexes like Scared to Death that nobody ever seems to run, and the dominance of Thrill of the Hunt, which should be culminating in a Thrill rework in the distant future, I think now more than ever would be a good time to take a critical look at the hex system as a whole, to try to understand DBD's most volatile perk designs and figure out how we got here. Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers, to Dead by Daylight's Hex Problem. Before we get started, I think we need to draw a bit of a line between the 2 different categories of hex perks, because not every hex is created equal. There are hexes that, broadly, survivors want to cleanse, like Ruin, Devour Hope, and Third Seal. And there are hexes that punish survivors for attempting to cleanse them or other hexes, like Haunted Ground, Retribution, or Pentimento. I'm going to call these Payload hexes and Punisher hexes respectively. One you want to protect and reap the benefits from over time, and one that will make survivors' lives more difficult for attempting to get rid of your payloads. So let's start with a pretty unfortunate truth. Most payload hexes are kind of bad right now, even the good ones. Speaking of bad, like, Jesus Christ, did you just see that hit? Anybody who's played DBD as long as I have will know how crushing it is to get hit on ping sometimes, especially if you play Survivor with friends living overseas. Some killers like the first go from being pretty fun to go against to becoming absolutely miserable on ping. Fortunately, the wonderful folks at GearUp have a solution to this problem. GearUp is an optimization service for many online games like DBD and the Outlast Trials that routes your connection through its own dedicated multi-path low traffic servers to reduce and stabilize your ping. As someone who plays on European servers, I regularly get put in matches with players from very far away who often break 100 ping in my lobbies, places like Saudi Arabia, North Africa, or the Balkans, because Behaviour doesn't have servers in those locations, or turns them off sometimes, so they connect to London or Frankfurt servers instead. But GearUp has over 7,500 servers across 180 countries and regions. Hello. Meaning that if you regularly connect to or from these remote areas and route yourself through GearUp's multipath connection, the improvements to your ping could be worth their weight in gold. Or, blood points. All it takes is one click, and you're off to the races. GearUp servers use 0% packet loss technology to protect your connection, and the whole system is 100% compatible with Easy Anti-Cheat, so there's really no risk to giving GearUp a go for yourself. To that end, check out the link in the description and use my code PIXEL to get yourself a 3-day free trial of GearUp, plus a 60% discount should you choose to sign on. Take a screenshot now so you don't forget, because this is a deal you do not want to miss out on. Thanks again to the team at GearUp for helping bring this video to you. Let's get back to yapping about hexes. Back when the hex system kicked off in 2017, Ruin became an instant staple as DBD's first real slowdown perk, and while Devour wasn't quite as ubiquitous, it was definitely a perk you ran into from time to time, far more than you see it today. The black sheep of the 3 original hexes was Third Seal, A perk that's basically gone unchanged since it came out for reasons I don't entirely understand, because its applications have both been extremely limited and very obnoxious whenever the perk has been relevant. Inflicting blindness, basically permanently, exists almost solely to fuck over solo queue players and occasionally work with slugging builds or whatever, but to be honest I just think blindness needs a full rework. Maybe that's a topic for another video. But Ruin was an amazing proof of concept for what the Hex system could do. It was a perk that absolutely demanded that survivors get off gens and cleanse it from the minute go if they wanted to progress the gens unless their skill check accuracy was absolutely perfect. For anyone who doesn't know, Ruin back in the day meant that whenever you passed a good skill check on a generator, it would regress by 5%, massively crippling the progression speed of generators over time unless you could land exclusively great skill checks. Devour was a little bit different in that it didn't demand immediate cleansing as soon as the match started. It only really did anything after the perk got 3 tokens. So what more often happened, and still happens on the rare occasion the perk sees play, is someone gets downed with the exposed, the game stops for a bit while at least one person takes out the Devour, and the perk is cleansed before the killer can get any additional value. Sometimes the perk does go on a high roll and just win the game by itself, but just as often it gets found and cleansed before getting a single iota of value. The Hex system as a whole is very feast or famine due to the RNG of totem spawns, but Devour is that idea writ large. The perk has one of the highest ceilings of any perk in Dead by Daylight, but also has one of the lowest floors, and that brings us to the concept of Punisher Hexes, which are designed to raise the effectiveness floor of these exceptionally volatile Hex perks by requiring more time investment or risk in fully getting rid of them. If Ruin and Devour were the OG Payload Hexes, then Thrill of the Hunt and Haunted Ground were the OG Punisher Hexes, because both of them made just immediately cleansing every hex you saw that bit less viable. Haunted Ground puts up 2 trap hexes that expose the entire team for a minute when cleansed, creating an extra risk to cleansing the first hex that you see. And Thrill of the Hunt slows down the speed at which totems are cleansed substantially, and used to give loud noise notifications as survivors hopped on a totem. But that got nerfed out of Thrill in 2021 for reasons we'll get into later. As the years traipsed on, we got a lot more Payload and Punisher Hexes, but more Payload I think. We got Wretched Fate, Blood Favour, Crowd Control, Nothing But Misery, Hunter's Lullaby, Overture of Doom, Under Your Thumb, Two Can Play and Scared to Death for our Payload Hexes, and Retribution, Undying, Pentimento and Dominus for our Punisher Hexes. Noed also got turned into a hex, alongside the release of Plaything and Face the Darkness, which are kind of odd ducks that deserve to be talked about on their own. Just gonna rip the band-aid off now. I think most payload hexes these days are just kind of bad for a lot of reasons. Part of it is to do with power creep on the survivor side and a general better knowledge of totem spawns by survivors, which we'll get into later when we talk about Punisher hexes. But I want to talk about payload hexes on their own merits first, because a lot of these hexes that you're supposed to want to stay up just aren't good enough to deserve that kind of volatility and investment compared to their non-hex alternatives. I think the best examples here are Two Can Play and Huntress's Lullaby. Lullaby is the classic skill check perk. As you hook more and more survivors, it delays and eventually removes the skill check sound. It is the perk you put on if you want to annoy streamers who are watching their Twitch chat while doing gens and just play by the sound cues on the skill checks. But beyond literally the most silly haha we got you novelty, what does this perk actually do? As a form of real gen slowdown, it is atrocious. I guess back when it was thought up, it meant to synergize with Ruin skill checks, but the function is well and truly gone now, especially because we have actual gen slowdown now that isn't countered by survivors just paying attention. It does kind of still have a home in dedicated skill check builds, but it's not even a particularly good perk at that one thing anymore, and a lot of skill check builds might not even run it, which is wild to me when you realise how fragile it is compared to the competition. Oppression and Merciless Storm are both actually alright perks that do stuff, that also work in skill check builds. Oppression skill checks are way more unpredictable than Lullaby's effect, and Merciless Storm skill checks are far harder to land as well. And both of these perks start the trial effective immediately, and can't just be cleansed to get rid of them. You've got Coulrophobia if you want to fuck with healing. You've got Overcharge if you want some actual gen slowdown that synergizes with Oppression. With the proliferation of 40 meter terror radius killers, you can even get some more value out of Unnerving Presence than you could before. Lullaby's effect is just not good, which is a problem when the perk is also fragile as hell and requires you to get hooked before it even gets going. I would call it power crept out of relevance, but that would require the perk to have ever been good in the first place. Two Can Play is a modern innovation into that design space of a hex that's just less impactful than the non-hex alternatives for no discernible reason. Toucan Play's immediate competition is Spirit Fury, because both setups heavily punish survivors for stunning the killer with pallets. Toucan Play blinds survivors after the killer is stunned twice, and the totem lights, and Spirit Fury instead just breaks the pallet that stunned the killer after 2 pallets are broken, whether or not those pallets stunned the killer. In what universe is Spirit Fury not just, better? Charging Spirit Fury is much easier than charging Toucan Play, because breaking 2 pallets is much easier than being stunned by 2 pallets. A lot of survivors just don't stun you very often because of ping or a lack of confidence in landing that stun. Some killers are just awkward to stun as well, which means they'll charge Spirit Fury much faster than Toucan Play. And against survivors who do regularly stun you, Spirit Fury with Enduring just fucking kills them, especially if you're running it on a kill like Leatherface or the Slaughtering Striker who choose 2 pallets at light speed if the survivors continue to pre-drop. Toucan Play doesn't actually prevent the survivor from making distance and doesn't help the killer catch up any quicker. Much like Spirit Fury, you need Enduring to make the most out of Toucan Play. But Enduring Toucan Play is just worse than Enduring Spirit Fury because you still have to deal with the pallet that's been dropped on your head. There's vanishingly little to no reason why you'd ever run Toucan Play over Spirit Fury, even if Toucan Play was not a Hex, which is insane to me when Toucan Play is a Hex. That's a downside that makes the perk vulnerable to being removed. Toucan Play and Lullaby are both perks that started shit and only got shitter over time, and there's quite a few hexes that are like this. Nothing But Misery is a perk designed to help M1 killers catch up after hitting survivors, but Help Wanted dropped from the very next chapter that filled a similar niche of helping M1 killers catch up after a hit. But it synergizes with Gen Kick perks and isn't a hex that requires 8 basic attacks to even do anything. Crowd Control might be the saddest example of a perk like this because the gameplay it offers is genuinely unique. Picking windows to block ahead of time is a pretty cool mechanic that encourages unique thinking from killers, but the perk is just so unreliable for so many reasons. Some maps like Gideon don't have enough windows to block to make the perk worthwhile. Some, like Larry's, have too many for crowd control to make a difference. Survivors who realise the perk is in play will just vault useless windows like Z-walls to ruin your little setup, and even if none of these things happen, you could spend all your time blocking the perfect windows on the map, only for the hex to disappear while you're doing this, and waste all your precious time. Meanwhile, Bamboozle exists. Crowd Control has some really cool design ideas, it just doesn't quite stick the landing, and that's pretty common for payload hexes these days. But we've talked enough about payload hexes for now, I think. What about the Punisher hexes? The Thrills, Pentamentos and Undyings of the world are much smaller in number, but are far, far stronger in my opinion than the payload hexes they're meant to protect. And all play very well together as well. To turn the momentary diversion of just getting rid of Ruin into a chore that defines the entire match. And there's no better example of this, in my opinion, than Thrill of the Hunt. Thrill is a hex perk that makes cleansing itself or other totems take much longer, up to twice as long as of the upcoming nerf in patch 10.1.0. This might seem innocuous at first glance, after all baseline hex cleansing is extremely fast, so what's the big deal? When you realise how well this plays with other layers of hex defense that you can run, we start to see a problem here. Because Thrill adds 14 seconds to cleansing your Ruin, that's no big deal. But that's assuming the totem you're cleansing is in fact the Ruin, and not the Thrill by mistake. You could be spending 28 seconds cleansing a hex that isn't doing anything to impact your game plan, but just running cover for the actual perk you're worried about that you then need to cleanse after that. If Undying is in play to take the hit, that's another 28 seconds. If Pentimento is active, you might have to spend that time again to get rid of the gen speed debuff. And this is all exacerbated by the way that totem cleansing progress is managed. Unlike Generator or Healing Progression, all progress on totems completely resets when you get off of one or interrupted off a totem cleanse, which means that Thrill doubling the time it takes to cleanse a totem gives the killer twice the time to intercept it and totally cancel that cleanse, which has created problems over the years as more killers came out who are more capable of pressuring totems. When it came out, Thrill of the Hunt used to give a loud notification for any survivors who were cleansing a totem on top of the totem slowdown, and Release Undying had a similar effect too, where killers saw the aura of any survivors near any totems, dulls or hexes alike. Thrill was mostly fine like this for years, in part because there weren't that many hexes worth protecting, but mostly because killers as a whole didn't have the means to contest totems terribly well. Most killers had no means of map traversal or ways to remotely protect hexes. They had to waddle their 115 ass across the map to their Thrill notification to contest the totem, which just wasn't worth it a lot of the time. But things started to change with the release of the Blight, Undying, Artist and Pentimento in short order, Undying was the best totem information and protection package in the game, and Blight was the single best user of it, able to effortlessly protect Ruin by following his aura reading around the map and requiring Undying to eat a hefty nerf, as much for its aura reading as it was for the several back-to-back respawning totems it created. The release of Portrait of Murder about a year later saw the loud notification on Thrill of the Hunt removed, in large part because Artist was able to remote target totems from afar with her birds, meaning she'd get a notification, send a swarm straight at that notification, and the survivor that got hit would have to immediately get off and reset the progress before she could send a second swarm to force them off it. This solved the issue for the moment, but we've come a long way since 2021, and killer power creep has allowed Thrill and other totem defense perks like Undying to flourish in an environment where killers can more easily pressure totems. Every new killer released these days has a method of either zooming around the map to check on totems like Kaneki, Krasu or Jason, or a way to monitor totems remotely like Singularity, Houndmaster and the brand new Judgment. And even older killers like Wraith and Freddy have been kitted out with new map ability tools to help them pressure totems easier and make the time to interrupt totem cleanses. Killers just have more agency to protect their bones than they used to, and that makes totem defense perks exponentially more effective, especially Thrill, since it increases the window in which totem can be interrupted. Behaviour found this out the hard way when trying to buff Thrill to 14% per standing totem instead of 10 a few patches ago. Killers like Singularity and Houndmaster made cleansing totems outright impossible, so the perk had to get nerfed back down to 12% and is about to get nerfed again back down to 10. But that's only half the story. Full-on totem defense builds with perks like Ruin and Bloodfavor are some of the strongest you can run in modern DBD, especially on modern killers who typically have the agency to defend those totems. But if you run Ruin or any of those perks individually without the support perks to back them up, they can honestly feel pretty toothless, because it isn't just killers who benefited from power creep and increased agency in matches. Over the past decade, the reasons and the tools survivors have to interact with totems have only increased, whether or not the killers are even using hex perks. Inner Strength in 2019 marked the first time survivors were given a reason to cleanse totems outside of getting rid of hexes, but the arrival of the boon mechanic in 2021 marked a huge shift in how survivors interact with totems, and it didn't stop there. Clairvoyance, Overzealous, Hardened, and most recently Lend a Hand all give survivors powerful benefits for cleansing totems even in a trial with no hexes. And that means that when a survivor is running a build like this and runs into a killer bringing hexes, the time-wasting nature of those hexes, where survivors have to get off their gens and look for totems, is kind of turned on its head a little bit. Survivors with these perks will already be looking for and cleansing totems anyway. Any value they get from taking out your perks along the way is just an added bonus. There's also more tools for survivors to track totems down than ever before. We've got Detective's Hunch, Counterforce, Extrasensory Perception, the buffed up small game. Maps are like actual items that do things now, even if no one runs them over medkits or toolboxes anyway. And even if we discount all of these tools and incentives that survivors have now, as the game goes on, more and more players just know where totems spawn now. So unless you're playing on Swamp, finding totems just isn't difficult now if you've been playing the game for a little while. This means that without at least one and possibly multiple Punisher hexes to protect them, payload hexes you just want to run for their value in one perk slot are going to disintegrate before being worth their while most of the time. And by Punisher hexes, I mostly mean Thrill, Undying or Penty. Haunted Ground eats absolute shit to Vigil, and Retribution is like, okay, I guess, but there's just better information you could get out there. And if the things that put your Retribution out happen to be a Shadow Step boon, you basically should just run in front of a moving train, because that's just God telling you there's no hope anymore. It gets worse, because not only are most of these payload hexes kind of bad, as we've established before, even the ones that are better tend to only get their value gradually over time, but without protection they don't tend to last long enough to get that value. Ruin is at its best in the late game when you can regularly pester the gens, but without heavy investment in protecting it, it won't even make it close to that far. Same goes for Devour or even Hunter's Lullaby in a hypothetical world where that perk is worth bringing. It's hard to justify not going all in to protect a hex if the only value it will provide is if it's protected for the long haul. Which brings us to an interesting question. What are we supposed to think about Bloodfavor? Bloodfavor is an incredibly strong perk. When taken on killers you can easily shut down distance or get the first health state without going through the post-hit cooldown, Bloodfavor can make early chases just so fucking free because it prevents survivors from interacting with the map's most plentiful resources. The perk is fucking crazy on killers with good distance denial, and it can even make weaker killers actually look somewhat decent in an early game chase. There's a reason I run it on Skull Merchant after all. And this means that even if Blood Favor gets cleansed quickly, there's still a very good chance it's gotten you enough value to justify the perk slot. One good chase, and one survivor off gens for a bit to find and cleanse it. Not a bad use of a perk slot, and it only gets better the longer the hex stays up. I want to say that you can't use Thrill or Undying or Penty or whatever to keep the hex up longer. In many ways, Blood Favor represents what a payload hex should be. The kind of perk that as soon as you see it being effective, the pressure is on you to get rid of it. Because if it stays up, the killer will get an extreme amount of value out of it. Better than fucking Scared to Death or Two Can Play anyway. It's got that oh shit factor, where it immediately changes the pace of the game from the moment it lights to the moment it breaks. Which would be fine if we didn't have all the protective hexes we were talking about earlier to punish you for doing what you absolutely have to do and cleanse that fucking hex. So, where does all of this leave us? Individual hex perks are almost all underwhelming on their own, but when run in sufficient density with lots of protective pieces to punish survivors for interacting with the hexes, what is normally a slight diversion becomes an obnoxious web of time-wasting and perk-to-perk synergy. We have a hex system that's, for the most part at least, shambling by, on the back of a couple of perks that are holding it together. Even the strong hexes like Ruin are dependent on layers of protection or punishment like Thrill or Pentimento to last long enough in matches to get the value they need. But this goes too far in a lot of situations. With the right killers and builds, cleansing totems and making meaningful gen progress goes from trivial to difficult to outright impossible. And as such, we have a hex meta that's built entirely on one or two perks, holding everything together. And one of those perks is getting reworked soon. Dear God. We don't know what this Thrill rework is going to look like. The new Thrill might be even more obnoxious than the existing one, and reinforce this totem lockdown meta we're in. Or it might be terrible, or entirely unrelated to hexes, kicking out the last Jenga piece that's been holding up the hex system until this point, and causing the whole thing to come tumbling down. But maybe Thrill dying an ignominious death might be the best outcome here, because it would provide the kick up the arse we need to truly grasp the dire straits the hex system is in, and maybe prompt behaviour to do something about it. But what can be done to drag the hex system out of the Dark Ages? I believe there is a few design principles that we should stick to for future hex perk designs and reworks to existing ones. The effects of immediately powerful hexes should be immediately noticeable from the moment they light, but no sooner or later. And hexes that get more indirect value should probably have some sort of self-preservation system, so that looking for and removing the hex takes enough time that the slowdown is in itself valuable. Fortunately, there's a few hexes already in the game that show how this could be done. Blood Favor is a great example of an immediately present, immediately threatening hex that demands you cleanse it, well, immediately. But I would like to draw attention to a few others that have really interesting designs that we should look to for guidance. Noed, Plaything, and Face the Darkness. From the moment those gens are done, Noed's effects are immediate and pronounced. It totally changes the pace of the endgame, whether or not the killer has a dedicated endgame build to go along with it. The killer has the opportunity now to start slugging or take an awkwardly positioned hook to build up pressure now that survivors are exposed and have used up most of the map resources. The survivors have to choose whether they leave their teammate to die to the Noed or wander into the map to cleanse it, risking running into the killer and dying in the process. Nobody really complains about Noed anymore, and that's crazy to me because the perk is still very, very, very good, and in my opinion is one of the best designed hexes in DBD. Plaything and Face the Darkness are a bit more subtle. These perks give you continuous value throughout the match by distributing Oblivious among the survivors and periodically making them scream respectively. And, fittingly for perks that don't turn the game around by themselves, fully cleansing them can be a bit of a challenge. Plaything covers the map in lit hexes, which will take ages to chew through even for a counterforce Giga Chad like me, and Face the Darkness can make you scream while cleansing it and jump around from totem to totem throughout the match, sometimes vanishing entirely in the middle of a cleanse, only to reappear later when somebody else gets injured. But what's convenient about all these three perks is that they don't play particularly well in full hex builds for a variety of reasons, meaning they're some of the best hexes you can run just as a one-off in a build. Face the Darkness can be good with Thrill specifically because every scream interrupts and resets totem cleansing actions, but the more hexes you cram into that build, the fewer places Face the Darkness has to pop up, meaning that it's relatively easy to find and extinguish once those early bones start to go. Plaything fills the map up with hexes so completely that there's just not room to run other hexes with it. I mean, if you want to run Thrill and Ruin and Bloodfavor with your Plaything, you'll only ever have 2 active Playthings up at once. And if you run it with Pentimento instead, the Oblivious is sufficiently unobtrusive effect that many survivors just won't cleanse the Playthings if they know Penti is in play, because Oblivious is often better than the Gen Speed debuff a lot of the time. And Noed, I mean, you can run it with Thrill if you want to, if you're okay with hoping your Thrill stays up for the entire match to protect it, which, no, that's never going to happen. It's usually best off in dedicated endgame builds instead, or as a back pocket perk if you suspect all the gens are going to get done, and you want to clean up an extra kill or 2 in the endgame. Bloodfavor, Noed, Plaything, and Face the Darkness. These are hexes that all have their detractors or might have their own design problems, but I think they provide a good model for the future of proactive hexes going forwards. Plaything and Face the Darkness show that hexes that provide indirect value can still be useful if they involve a natural time-wasting element. So survivors have to choose between whatever mildly irritating debuff the hex provides and actually going out of their way to get rid of that debuff and slow the game down as a result. I think this approach could be applied to other indirect value hexes like Third Seal, Hunter's Lullaby, and Overture of Doom, maybe even the new perk Under Your Thumb. Imagine for Under Your Thumb, for example, instead of 1 hex lighting for the entire team, each survivor who gives themselves over 15% haste activates their own Under Your Thumb totem, kind of like Plaything, and has to cleanse it themselves if they want their full exhaustions available. Or if Overture of Doom only lit up when its curse generator got touched for the first time and jumped to a new totem when the killer kicks that generator. There's room in the design space for these perks to make them more tricksy and time-wastery to give them a place in builds. I'm sure we all appreciate experimentation in this space. On the flip side, we have perks like Scared to Death, Devour Hope, and even Ruin, which might in theory be somewhat okay perks, but seem to be balanced entirely on having a network of other perks designed to keep them up long enough to do anything useful. That should be changed in my opinion at least. Hexes that demand to be cleansed should either have more immediate impact and early cleanse doesn't feel so bad, like Bloodfavor, or should have some kind of inbuilt protection so that it's more reasonable for them to survive long enough to get value. Maybe Devour should get a more pronounced effect for its first couple of tokens, or only light when you get your first token. Maybe Ruin should only light when the killer kicks their first generator so that they can choose whether to start the gen regression manually rather than having someone spawn on top of it before it can ever get value, so you don't depend on Undying to ensure it lasts longer than a minute. But we really can't justify positive changes to these sorts of perks, especially perks like Ruin that are already strong, with the Punisher hexes being the way that they are. And by the Punisher hexes, I mostly just mean Thrill. Maybe Pentimento and Undying. Retribution, Haunted Ground, Dominus, these perks are fine. Nothing to worry about here. Fortunately, when it comes to Thrill being changed, behaviour looks to be one step ahead of us. Thrill is getting a rework on the Chorus of Sin mid-chapter, and it's possible that with Thrill packed away, we'll see the entire hex mechanic for the shambling shell of a system that it is. But it's also possible that Undying or Pentimento might still gatekeep individual hexes from being allowed to be decent. So if action is taken to broadly buff up the hex system to make it more resilient at a baseline level, these are perks that you'd have to keep an eye on, alongside Thrill if it remains a Punisher hex after the rework drops. Truth be told, I don't know what the future of the hex system looks like, because it depends so much on what happens to Thrill in a month or two's time. But I do know what it looks like now. It looks like a fucking mess. If you're not going all in on hexes and a pile of time-wasting bollocks that would make hens proud, you're probably not running hexes at all. And a bunch of hexes just are not good enough to run to make the cut even if you do build around them. It makes the existing hexes, even the crappiest of crap ones, impossible to buff, and means that any new hexes, like Under Your Thumb, have to fit into this stifling setup of perks. Not to mention the effects that this kind of excessive time wasting has on the survivor gameplay experience in any games that have hexes. I think we can do better. I think we as players deserve better, and we'll see how things shake out when that Thrill rework drops to see if what's left of the hex system can rise from the ashes of an old, turgid and long stale meta. Truth be told, I'll kind of miss it. I've been running Thrill Penti builds since 2021, when I started using them to combat the boon meta at the time, and they've become a firm favourite of mine across several different killers. I was running this perk combo long before it was cool, but I think I'd be happy to see the Hex system shaken up and hopefully something better come of it in the long run. If nothing else, the Lay Waste Eruption combo dropping with Chorus of Sin is going to give you a new alternative slowdown suite to play with, one that I think might be meta. Wait, actually, yeah, Chorus of Sin should be pretty soon, right? So, where's the lore? We still haven't got it. Guess I'll see you when we find out for the Chorus of Sin lore video. Till next time.